You're saying that indigenous people, for example, how does the mucusless diet fit into what indigenous people on the planet eat, like in Africa or the indigenous people of America, Australia, everywhere? Has it always been kind of in that direction of eating mucusless, or don't we like, do we even know because it has already been corrupted through colonization? How does that fit into that philosophy?
Yeah, that's, I used to try to go through books of, the history of human diet and that kind of thing. And most of those texts all agree that, early humans were plant based before they started hunting, before searching out for meat. There was in an agrarian society or societies or even families or tribes or whatever structure that was there before large scale agriculture really hit. And so the way we look at that is, first and foremost, as Eric said, you can, there's a reason why somebody could be vegetarian and die before somebody that's what he calls a one-sided meat eater. And the principle here that he talks about is this concept he explains called vitality equals power minus obstruction. But basically what that means is the more obstructed that the system gets, the higher likelihood there's going to be disease and disease symptoms.
Yeah.
So if you have a vegetarian that's an overeater of the worst foods and eating all kinds of whatever it is and the Oreo cookies and all these things that are supposed to be vegan and the vegan Doritos or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody that's a junk food vegetarian or vegan, they can be be healthier or be less healthy than someone that's a meager eater and so and might have just a little bit of meat, or a little bit of whatever. And when you look at a lot of the indigenous peoples, even if they were meat eaters, they were never gluttonous. They weren't gluttonous. They're not like today, where even some folks that live more indigenous lives now are from that, just haven't really industrialized or anything. But you'll see videos of them and they'll be overweight or kind of go get sick and stuff because that influence, as you said, colonialization. I mean, even if they didn't adopt the technology, it's like their eating habits have changed, whether they were forced to change because they were relocated, like in the United States, where they would take people that lived over here that were used to this climate and relocate them to another location where it's like, well, this land, we can't use this land and do what we were doing before. And so, so that entire process has been real messed up. But the thing is, though, eventually that transition of eating poorly, the transition. So yes, you can be indigenous and it's way better to not be gluttonous, and they can live pretty long. And that's where people say, well, I know people that would eat that are indigenous, or some people that ate a lot of rice and these kinds of things, or even meat, and they live real long lives. It's like, but everybody is a carbon copy of their parents, and so you can't do what your parents did and expect to live as long as them. And so that transition toward degeneration happens successively. And so it's like, so yeah, you could try to use that reasoning and be like, well, I'm just trying to eat like this and that. But at the end of the day, see, those folks, the indigenous folks, if they had access to, really had access to the foods that they would need to transition, fresh fruits and vegetables, and somebody was able to explain to them that dynamic, and they were able to start transitioning away from those items. I mean, these would be the healthiest people in the world. I mean, they could take things to a whole different level. But I think one of the reasons that we in the so-called Western world we have to start doing what we're doing now. We got to start this transition process because it makes sense that the sickest people on the planet would be the ones to discover a way to heal themselves and transition back to a more natural human existence. And so because the people that are halfway healthy, I mean, and the indigenous people, they're not going to figure that out. They're not going to figure out like, okay, this is how you, because they don't even eat like that. So this is how you transition off of pizza. Well, a lot of them never eaten pizza. You know, this is how you transition off a bacon cheeseburger. You know, that's just, if they were to eat those food. And that's why a lot of indigenous people died. And that's a story that doesn't get told enough. The atrocities and sort of the outright murder gets discussed. Then again, like in the U.S., they want to try to blame the near genocide of Native peoples in Americas on the microbes and that kind of thing. When because then that would be a thing where it's like, yeah, they were way healthier than the Europeans that came over, but they weren't healthy enough to have that immunity to what they were bringing over. And you can see there's a different, like, that didn't happen to the immunity levels of a lot of African people seem to be different, because you don't hear, there was a lot of, there was folks that died in similar ways, but not in that unprecedented numbers that you saw with Native peoples in Americas. And so, but that's a thing too that people don't really look at. If you look at the at slavery and the diet, that European diet, which is one of the worst diets on the planet, being forced on the people. So even if those people ate whatever, it was nothing like that European thing. And not only that, but they're being forced to eat the worst part of that, like the scraps of that type of diet. So people don't really, they just, because they look at food as this sort of just, well, food is food. It's like, no, if I was to put somebody on what I eat without transitioning, like I go to some place and just say, okay, you're going to eat just like I'm eating now with no transition, a lot of those people would die because they didn't, I spent 17 years transitioning to eat what I eat, and to do the kind of fasting I do and that kind of thing. If somebody forced me to eat what they eat, I would probably die, because if I went back to eating like I used to eat again without transitioning back to it, I wouldn't last real long. I would be, it would be I just wouldn't last. It would just be like taking any other poison, where once that poison is too toxic for your system to either eliminate it or neutralize it, then you die. And so that's a big key in understanding the history of the stomach. That's what we say is you want to analyze the history of your stomach. That's one reason why it's easier for some people to practice the mucusless diet and to transition than others, because of their ancestry. And because you're dealing with the eating habits of your parents, grandparents, and those generations. And so some of us that are a little bit closer to the mucusless people of mucusless ancestors, we don't have to go through as much. Like, there's a lot of elimination to go through, but it's going to be different, and you might be, and that's going to inform how you transition. And that's one thing I think sometimes people don't really understand, or you got to take that into account. And that's part of not being hard on yourself and not trying to feel guilty or mad. It's just one of those things you just have to accept. It is what it is. Your ancestors, you couldn't control that. So they ate what they ate, but now you're the custodian that has to come in after the fact and let's clean up the blood, clean the blood up. And so what excites me is the thought of how far we can transition in 2 or 3 generations. So because there's a lot of people that are real self-absorbed, and they're so focused on themselves and talking what they want to do, and I want to eat nothing but fruit, and I'm trying to be mucusless and all this kind of stuff. And I'm saying, clean up your blood, and you put yourself in the position where, because as you clean up your blood, and you really practice the diet, you will be better equipped to transition your children properly. And if you've done this before you conceive, then unknown pain and suffering, you've eliminated. Like, you've gone through that first. You've been able to eliminate this pain and suffering by you going through whatever it is you've gone through your detox process and your elimination process. Then you have a child, and and you're actually creating something better than you now, something cleaner than you. Whereas right now, most people on I renamed it the standard anywhere diet. There's that SAD. They used to, the standard American diet. A lot of people here use that little terminology. And so I'm like, well, I'm dealing with people all around the world all the time. And so it's like, but that still exists everywhere, the standard anywhere diet, because it's SAD all over the world.
Yes.
And so that becomes a really important thing to understand, is that dynamic of transition, but the potential to really transform the human species in 2 or 3 generations. If you have enough people really getting serious, this initial generation of getting into the mucusless diet, I mean, it's gonna, it's not gonna be pretty. It's not necessarily gonna be, like, this is hard work. You're literally turning around and going 180 degrees in the opposite direction. But when you with the children and then children's children, now you're gonna be, a couple, 2 or 3 generations, you can start to talk about humans that do not know, that start to lose the concept of what disease is in the modern way that we describe it, that wouldn't even understand what you're talking about. Just a heart attack. What's that? Or, allergies, and, just that whole thing that we grew up with is just a part of life that can be extinguished. We're just not going to do it by ourselves today. It's going to have to be a generational thing. And I think that kind of foresight is needed. We need more of that to understand that it's not about us. It's about that bloodline and cleaning up the blood. And as you clean up the blood and pass that forward, that's how you truly transform the human species and transform the world. For all the people that want to talk about, I want to transform the world and change the world and that kind of stuff, first you got to change your gut. You got to change your blood, clean up your blood, transform your blood, and the sky's the limit at that point. Transition, and why not examine that? Why not go down that road and see what it is? Because we've tried the other direction. We know where that goes.
It's
nowhere good. So
exactly,
what do we have to lose to go down this road and see what's down here? It's like Brother Air often says, name me one person that you personally know that died eating nothing but fruits and green leafy vegetables. They're like, no, I don't know anybody that for years, for their life, they ate fruits and green leafy vegetables and then they died. We don't know that. So at least we don't know what's down this path. We know exactly what's down the other path. And so,
yes.
So that's an important thing to understand.